Good evening, namaste, and salam alaikum to all. I am so glad that today we have Bill Kaplan in this web series, and it is such an honor that he has accepted my invitation and being part of this conversation. I'm sure this series would provide us a great learning opportunity from his 40 years of experience in military based and also 20 plus years of knowledge management practitioner as a practitioner experience. So thank you, Bill, for accepting and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So Bill, let me start with the first question. How did you start your knowledge management journey? I mean, I know you're from the defense. You started your career with defense. Probably a bit about your early career and how did you kind of get going into knowledge management. That's something which I want to hear from you.
Good. Yeah, thank you so much. Glad to help you out with this. So it's a really good story. I retired from the Air Force in 1998 and went to work for a systems engineering, system integration company. And was walking down the hall one day and there was a sign that the chief knowledge officer for the company was going to be talking about the company. And I said, yeah, okay, this sounds good. There was a little bit of description of what it was, and it sounded interesting. So it was about an hour out of my day. I sat through the presentation, and I was really stunned because I had never really put a name to knowledge management in 1998, but in the Air Force, just by virtue of the way planning and operations take place in the Air Force, there's consistent learning before and learning during and learning after so that you can form better policy, make better decisions and such.
Okay.
And I never really thought about it from the perspective of knowledge management, but when I went and sat through the presentation, it was as if they put a frame around it.
Okay.
I changed my career path, changed from what I had been focusing on previously to focusing more and more on knowledge management. And so I was influenced by the presentation, influenced to actually make a second career in knowledge management. And that's basically how it started.
All right. Okay. That's so that presentation was really life-changing path for you. I mean, that's what I understand, right? So good. So now, I mean, did you kind of? I see that you kind of have you started working as a knowledge management professional. I mean, as one of the roles in the defense itself, or you kind of started with various other firms. How did you kind of pursue it again?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
So after that, you applied for that job and then you kind of got going into knowledge management specific roles, is it?
Oh, how did my career progress from there?
Yeah, yes.
So I worked at that company for 7-8 years. As I mentioned, focused more and more on knowledge management processes, understanding the concepts, and then doing consulting, actually using my insight, my experience to help guide other people and organizations. And in 2005, I was approached by a consulting company in Washington, D.C., which is where I was living, right outside the Washington area.
Okay.
And they were looking for a chief knowledge officer and also a chief knowledge officer that had specific consulting experience or subject matter expertise in the area that the consulting company focused on with their clients.
Okay.
So I started working there. I was the chief knowledge officer. It was a very valuable position. I learned a lot about where knowledge management can have the most impact within an organization. In this case, the chief knowledge officer reported directly to the chief executive officer and the president, which was a very, very powerful message to the clients and to the workforce about the value of leveraging knowledge. And in fact, this organization was actually, it's interesting, a virtual organization.
Okay.
Didn't have brick and mortar building. So it was early application of what we're actually doing right now during COVID. It's almost like we went full circle. But at that time, they were moving into a brick and mortar building, and not only was I responsible for internal knowledge management guidance and consulting, internal consultant, but I was developing a delivery practice for our clients. And so in 2009, I decided to branch off on my own. And it's now just 11 years since I started Working Knowledge CSP. And this is how I evolved from that meeting in the hallway at that sign all the way to you and I talking today. It's been a really, really good journey. I've enjoyed it. It's been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm sure. I see that during that time around, you have written a book on losing minds, capturing and leveraging retention of organization knowledge. Could you talk a bit about that book? I mean, like what again is it? Yeah, based on your defense experience and your working knowledge management experience, or like what prompted?
Actually, it was a combination of a lot of things. That Losing Your Minds book was a book focused on the challenges and risks of mitigating knowledge loss due to workforce turnover. So there was a lot of discussion at that time around the aging of the workforce, retiring of the quote unquote baby boomers. But when you think about it, it's way more than just retiring workforce. People will leave an organization or leave their job or leave their position for any number of reasons. Could be a promotion, could be reassignment, could be termination. There's a life cycle for an employee. There's a life cycle for an organization. And one of the things that the big takeaways from my understanding of the challenges I had faced with many of my clients and much of what was going on was the fact that when a person leaves an organization, it's really synonymous with knowledge leaving the organization. And if the organization does not have what I would call consistent and disciplined processes for capturing workforce knowledge as part of workflow, as part of the way work is done, for capturing it, making sense out of it, characterizing it for reuse in the context of that organization, and then making it searchable, findable, downloadable, and reusable, they tend to place themselves at a significant competitive advantage. And depending on the size of the organization and the relative criticality of the knowledge that's leaving, could actually end up in that organization going out of business. And so the book was focused on helping the reader to understand what the challenges were, how they come about, what are some of the solutions, and looking at this issue of workforce turnover as a risk management and change management problem, so that you were able to, in advance, take actions that would minimize the impact of people leaving the organization through the ability to develop a very coherent knowledge management strategy with a very phased, timelined, specific implementation plan based on that strategy, and then activities that were required from a change management perspective in order to be able to sustain that investment in knowledge management and continue to, as what we call it, operating faster than the speed of change.
Okay. Just to play devil's advocate here, one of the, I mean, if you look, generally what has happened is, how do you see when organizations say that we are already doing knowledge management? I mean, may not be formally, but HR, they're focusing on, human resource training and various other functions. There are functions, right? I mean, multiple functions doing multiple knowledge management. Though we can say it's knowledge management, but whatever they're doing is also part of knowledge management. Still, my question here is, just to play a devil's advocate here, doing came formally and an organization not doing came formally, how do you see, what is the crux of it? I mean, how does an organization evolve if it does came formally, and what would be the fallout of any organization if they're not keenly doing came formally? From your experience, probably you could shed kind of, give the both context and probably, share some light on this.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. It's a really good question. So let me start out by saying, regardless of what you call it, whether you call it knowledge management or something else, most, if not all organizations, just by virtue of the fact that they operate, are doing things associated with leveraging what they know. Even the most basic processes where you have a plan and you execute that plan, and then you take a look at how did that all turn out, it's a fundamental process. So I truly believe, and I believe this to be primarily true, is that most organizations do something associated with learning and capturing that learning, even if it's just to think back individually and reflect on what's been done, and then to use that knowledge in the future to continue to do that work or new tasks.
Okay.
And I think what you're getting to is, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that how do you actually build on that within an organization?
Yeah.
How do you make the ability to perform, then learn, and then perform again based on that learning part of the way work is done? Because we know, and I believe this, that organizations that view knowledge management as an afterthought tend not to actually move past that initial state that you and I were just talking about. For knowledge management generally to be acceptable, it has to really be built into the fabric of the organization, so that it's not viewed as extra work, it's viewed as part of the work, or organizations that recognize the value of leveraging their knowledge, that it becomes part of a different way to work. Is that?
Yeah.
And then from that, organizations will develop a strategy for leveraging their knowledge based on their unique business and operational environment, why they exist, what their mission is, who they are, and their unique knowledge management environment, meaning the maturity level of what the work that they're doing in knowledge management. And so you would build a strategy based on those two environments, and then you would work from there. And we can talk a little bit more about that later if you wish.
Yeah, no, I think you mentioned a couple of points which are really key here. One is to how an organization reflects upon the learning and use it as a base to build upon it. I think that's a key element, one of the fundamental element which I think is essentially differentiate when we're talking about knowledge management. Maybe you might use various labels, it is fine, but the focus and the whole organization is looking through this framework. I think the energies come together. I think that's fundamentally, it really creates a lot of synergy. I think that's the other important outcome which might arise out of knowledge management. From what you say, this is what I understand. I think again, I've seen your article. I read one of the article where you mentioned. I think I really like this article because I think in that you mentioned you're given a slide where you have shown you have a business environment and various other things, and generally knowledge management, all the company focuses from the technology perspective. So the address happens from the knowledge management technology perspective. So more, it's not from the top layer. I mean, I'm not sure which presentation I saw. It was really very well put together because from past 20-25 years, I think the focus of the industry has been in terms of trying to operate on the knowledge management technology perspective, try to provide solution systems. And I think that is why I feel that the focus needs to be shifted on the human. I think that is one of the classic game which is the most essential. Are you able to kind of get which article you were talking about, right? I think you got it right. So I think I really liked it because fundamentally that distinction needs to come out. I mean, would you want to talk about that a bit more? I mean,
yeah, sure. That presentation you were talking about is, I believe, the one talked about turning KM theory into KM practice.
Yes.
And it was was presented at the Knowledge Management Showcase in Washington in March of last year. And the basic takeaway from the presentation was that there's many, many, many different ways to implement knowledge management, and that technology is not the main event in knowledge management. When you think about knowledge management, and I'll use the term holistically or from a 360-degree perspective, technology is extremely important.
Indeed.
But it is not the main event. And the reason I believe this, and among many reasons, is that if you think about knowledge in terms of two pieces, all of information in an organization, all of that information is explicit, it's codified, you can touch it, books on your desk, you can search for things. That's information.
Right.
Experience, what people know, their head knowledge, how they do things, how they connect the dots, who they talk to when they have challenges. That's all personal and tacit. Knowledge, if I was to give you a very simplified explanation, is information plus experience and context being used to take an action. So organizations that are able to leverage all of their information and all of their experience are in a much better position to be able to adapt to new challenges, make better decisions, and again, operate faster than the speed of change because they're able to leverage the evolving knowledge base in the organization. In order to do that, technology plays a very, very important role. But we're not to the point yet where technology, even AI, can actually take what's in your head, make sense out of it, and characterize it for use in the context of that particular organization, and then be able to use it. So, alluded to earlier, there's 5 major areas that we look at when we think about knowledge management in an organization. We think about the people and the culture. We think about their processes. We think about enabling technology and tools. We think about content and how that content's created and managed. And very importantly, we think about the KM structure or the governance structure for sustaining the knowledge management investment and the effort within an organization. So as you can see, 5 major pieces. I'm sure there's others, but these are the 5 main ones. Enabling technology and tools is very important, but not necessarily the main event.
Yeah. I think this particular aspect, I think it has come out of this decade as a major learning as a whole community, because somehow, I mean, correct me if from my experience, I think in the early 2000 and the technology really moved up, and over a period of time, the hype cycle kind of got burst, and again there was a dwindling down of this knowledge management as a concept, and again the whole focus is reappearing around the real classic game. I think that is really good, which I think is very important. I mean, just talking only about technology will not solve the real knowledge management. I think that's a real. I like that one. Now,
let me add a comment to that, just to be a little clearer. While technology may not be the main event, but for that particular organization who wants to be involved in knowledge management, or who wants to be able to more effectively find knowledge, find content within their organization, whether it be an artifact or a person with experience, technology plays a very, very important role. And it may be the door or the starting point from which that organization begins its knowledge management journey. Or said another way, the big challenge that they're trying to address could be just something as simple as finding content within all of their information architecture, within all of the places that stuff is stored. And it's the starting point. And then recognizing that there are, from my perspective, 4 other areas that you need to address. That's perfectly okay. That's where this organization wanted to start, because every organization is different. They have different challenges, which is why every organization's knowledge management strategy and roadmap will be different.